Good morning, everybody. This is your lecturer of DIM. You're most welcome. Welcome back from the long, unplanned for holiday. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is keeping safe. I hope everyone is observing the SOPs because I want to see everybody back. At the university, we'll have to do exams. We have to get to other semesters and other years. So please keep yourselves safe. And I pray that we'll be in position to meet in December for the exams. Now, I'm going to take you through database development, that is SQL. Before we broke off, I had gone through our last theoretical chapter, which was normalization. And of course, given the nature of our course, it is both practical and theory. I am not going to go through any theoretical bit of the class because we don't have a lot of time to finish this course. So we shall just straight away go into this SQL. Now, if you look at one of the prerequisites of this course, we are assuming that one, you have a good understanding of all the of everything that we covered in entity relationship modeling. You have a good grasp of the entity and referential integrity rule. You have also a very good grasp of mapping and normalization. So it is imperative that every one of us has they have a WAMP server installed on their laptops because WAMP has both MySQL, where we're going to do our databases, but also it has a PHP for those who will be interested to do scripting, connecting the back end with the front end. So please, please ensure that everyone has WAMP server. For those of you who don't have laptops, I don't know how best we're going to do this, but maybe you can follow through and you can get assistance from either your parent or your friend. I don't know how, but you can also follow through such that you get these basic concepts. So SQL is a standard query language that database developers use to create tables in a database. SQL is also referred to as a transform-oriented language. Why? Because it is a language that is designed to use relations to transform inputs to outputs. So the database language must be able to allow a user to create a database and also be in position to create other related structures like the tables, like the columns, and many others. So SQL is very portable because we can have an easy to learn command line interface. So the main characteristics of SQL are, and before I go there, I should mention that this recording can only permit me to do a recording up to 15 minutes. So should I, if I'm not in position to finish within the 15 minutes, then I'll have to inevitably do another recording, which I'll upload. But I pray that I'll be in position to do that within the 15 minutes. So the main characteristics of SQL are, one, it's very easy to learn. That's very true. Why? Because it uses standard English words like select, insert, update, delete, drop, etc., etc. So it's very, very easy to learn. Then it's a non-procedural language. In other words, it specifies what information you require, not how you want to get it. And then it has been used by a range of users, including database administrators, management personnel, and other novice users. So those are some of the characteristics of SQL. So SQL is an important language for many reasons. Why? It is a language that was first. It is the first language that was used in database development, and it has gotten a very wide acceptance. Then 2, there is a huge investment in SQL, both the vendors and the users. In most cases, if you go in different companies, you'll find that most of these companies are using SQL as their database language. And then its acceptance to other standards, it has the ISO standard that it adheres to. So that makes it really an important language to use. The objectives of SQL is 1, to create database and other table structures. Then 2, performing data management tasks, for example, to be able to insert, to be able to modify, and to be able to delete data from the database. But most importantly, also, it helps to perform both simple and complex queries. We're going to see the different queries that we can use in the databases, but of course you can only use queries if you have data or if you have populated your data in the database. But we're going to look at these different queries, and you will be in position to enjoy this. So the ISO, remember I've talked about the SQL standards, the adherence to different standards, and one of the standards is the ISO standards. So the ISO standards, or the major components of SQL, are the data definition language, which helps us to define the structures of your database, and then the data manipulation language that helps us to manipulate the data in the database. I remember in our theory, I mentioned about the data definition language, and I mentioned, I can reiterate, I say that in the data definition language, here we're looking at how do you create tables in the database, how do you create columns in the database, and other related structures like constraints, like data types, like domains, etc., etc. And the data manipulation language specifically will look at 4 things: selecting of data in the database, inserting data in the database, deleting data in the database, and updating data in the database. So those are the major things that you're going to find in in the structured query language, and those are the major things that we're going to look at in this course. At the end of this course, most of us should be in position to use those basic concepts of SQL. So when you're writing SQL, we're saying that SQL is not case sensitive, okay? In other words, it is not, it doesn't react to the different cases that you're going to use. But if, for example, you have stored a certain field, like the name Hasifah, you have stored it in uppercase, and then when at the time of query, you query it in small letters, the row will not be found. So what essentially this means that whatever you have populated, if you have populated your data in a particular case, then that means even when it comes to manipulation, you have to manipulate it in that case. But when it comes to the SQL statements, for example, where you're using where and update, etc., etc., those ones are not case sensitive. So the SQL statements we're going to use, in summary, we're going to look at the select statement. This one helps us to retrieve data from the database. We're going to look at the create, where you're in position to create a table, you're in position to create a column. We're going to look at alter. Alter helps us to modify data in the database. You can modify your table name, you can modify your column name, you can modify a constraint. Then drop. Drop helps us to delete, let's say, data in the database. You can also delete a column from the database, or you can remove the table from the database. Then also rename. Then when it comes to data manipulation, we're going to look at insert, update, and delete. I mentioned even when we were doing our theory, I kept on talking about the data types, and we have different data types that you will find in your chapter. But the most commonly used kinds of data types, you have the date data type, you have the int data type that looks at the numbers, you have the char that has a specific number of characters that you would want, then you have a varchar that has the variable, it gives you a a different range of characters that you can have in your column, and many others as you see them there, or as you will read in your chapter. So then we have DDL with tables, the data definition with tables, creating, modifying, and deleting. We have said that those are the key things we are going to look at, but it's not limited to that. Then creating a table. Now, how do you create a table in SQL? We're saying that it involves using the create table statement, which includes specifying the table name. It's mandatory that you specify the table name. It's also mandatory that you specify the columns that are in your table. Remember, columns are referred to as fields. And then the other things are optional, like the constraint, for example, the null constraints, the check constraints, the unique constraints, those are optional. And then also the default value is also optional. Specifying the table constraints is also an optional part in the creating of the table in the database. I have so far used 11 minutes. I have 4 minutes to go. So now this is the general syntax of creating a table in the database in MySQL. That's the general syntax, and down here is an example. If you see here, this is an example of creating a table called employee, and in the brackets we have employee ID, which is an integer, and then you have the name, which is a varchar, and the domain the domain is 30 characters. So that is the general syntax of creating a table. Now, then you can also create a table with a default option. So the default here we are referring to should you leave the column, sorry, should you leave that particular column with no values, then the default value is that one that you have specified. So in this case, if you look at M, it means that M is going to be a default value if you have left the column empty without any data. Then creating the table using the table and the column constraints. So constraints enforce rules on data whenever a row is inserted, updated, or deleted from the column. The constraints have to be satisfied for the operation to succeed. So the data integrity constraint, number one, we have what we call a not null. A not null specifies that that particular field cannot be left without a figure. We have learned that in our theory. Then we have unique. A unique value essentially means that you can all the values of that particular column are unique. In other words, they cannot be replicated in other rows. The difference between a primary key and unique is, one, the primary key is by default, or in other words, it is automatically unique. Okay, but then when you look at a unique constraints, we are saying that a unique constraint can apply to various. You can have many unique constraints on your table, but you can only have one primary key on your table. So that means that you can have only one primary key on a table as a constraint, but you can have multiple unique constraints in your table. So you can set, for example, department ID to be unique. You can set department name to be unique, etc., etc. Now, this is what we have there in our slide. That one is the generic statement for a unique constraint, where we say create a table student. It has ID number, ID, which is an integer, and it should not be a null value. Then the last name, a varchar, it has 15 characters. It shouldn't be a null value. Then the first name, age, which is an integer, and we are saying that unique. So the ID should be unique. In other words, if for the different rows, all the IDs should specifically be left as unique values. Remember, I said that unique can also apply on multiple columns. Okay, so where you have unique as an ID number, and also you can have unique as the last name. So This video is 15 minutes. I have done with the 15 minutes. I need to do another recording. Kindly bear with me. Thank you.